What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Well, aloha and welcome. This is not Mike Rivero. This is Ryan Dawson filling in for Mike. Mike's sick. He's going to take the week off. You probably haven't heard my voice for a while, at least not on this show, but I'm back and ready to try and fill these big shoes that Mike has left behind. We'll be getting into the news. Taking this short notice to do a 3-hour show, but I'm going to try the best I can. The number to call in for the What Really Happened show is 800-313-9443. You're welcome to call about any subject, but let's try and keep it on track and not get too derailed. I'd like to open up, talk about what we're going to be talking about. We've got the Democratic debates. That may be why Mike is sick. He maybe had to sit through and see all of that, and that would pretty much do anyone in. We have the unfortunate passing of, in my opinion, the most prolific and stellar anti-war writer of this generation, and that's Justin Raimondo, who often wrote for antiwar.com. He also wrote for the American Conservative Magazine and Tacky Mag from time to time. I have been reading Justin since I was about 20, so almost 20 years, and 3 times a week. And he was stellar, and I'm sure we will all miss him very much. I'm sure a lot of Mike's audience overlap with Justin's audience. You can still find his articles at antiwar.com. They are archived and will be, and they are going to be reserving his work over there. Scott Horton also did a send-off on his radio show, which you can find at the scotthortonradio.org. It's sad we lose the good ones, and evil men like John Bolton still walk around. John Bolton was recently in Japan for the G20. He flew there from Israel, so he left his paymasters to come over to where I am. I'm in the land of the rising sun. This is where I live. It is 5 a.m. here, by the way. So if I start a little slow, that may be, well, not maybe, that is the reason. But Bolton came, and he pretty much does what he always does. He sabotaged any attempts at anything rational or productive. John Bolton is essentially a paid asset of Israel and Saudi Arabia. He has completely lost it over North Korea, because after the G20 completed, Donald Trump decided to go over to Korea, and he became the first American president to cross the DMZ and walk into North Korea since the Korean War, since the creation of North Korea. And you saw a lot of Democrats, not all, but a lot of them, just because they're on the other side, and that's how these partisan tribalists are, just completely dogpile on Trump for talking to a dictator. How dare you? How dare you have dialogue? I don't know. Maybe because not having dialogue has worked so well. Decade upon decade, what have we created in North Korea? A nuclear-armed enemy with a starving population. Why would you want the status quo to continue? So Bolton, who the North Koreans referred to as the defective human product, I think that's one of the best nicknames for a neocon ever, came out with a statement today chastising the New York Times. Apparently the New York Times had written up that the Trump administration was seeking a compromise with North Korea, which involved a freeze of the nation's nuclear arsenal instead of immediately insisting on denuclearization. Now, let me rewind a bit back to the Hanoi Summit. Actually, let me rewind a bit back to the 90s. In 94, there was the 6-member nation talks with South Korea, North Korea, China, Russia, the United States, and Japan. And the idea was that North Korea was going to downgrade their weapons enrichment and downgrade their capacity to annihilate Seoul of South Korea in steps. And in return, there would be sanction relief in steps, which is a lot easier to do than sort of this all or nothing, all at once agreement that the neocon and Pompeo are pushing for. And so that is where it was. In Japan and the United States are the ones that botched that deal. South Korea, North Korea, China, and Russia had all agreed. we haven't been that close to any sort of disarmament or path towards production in a long time. During those talks, also, they had cooperative economic zones where the North and South were allowing South Korean businesses to enter a limited section of North Korea where North Korean workers would work for a South Korean company and test out a bit of capitalism, get some capital going, get more relationships working. And this was working for a time before it all became sabotage. But it brings me to an interesting story about the cookie incident. And I am going to fast forward to Hanoi and then to the modern times, but I think this is interesting for the audience. The cookie incident, or moon pie, as a lot of Southerners in the United States are aware of, involved something called choco pie. It's the Japanese moon pie. Meiji chocolate in Japan was actually started by a South Korean citizen. So both countries share this product. And this is something that they thought would be harmless enough to build in North Korea. It's not a steel factory. They're not building weapons. There's nothing you can really claim is dual technology or dual purpose use of a moon pie. It's just chocolate and marshmallow and I'm not sure, but some sort of cookie and product inside. Yeah, they are delicious though. And so they opened up a chocolate pie / or chocolate cookie making factory in North Korea, and things were going along swimmingly until around New Year's, when the company decided to give their workers a bonus in the form of the pies. And the pies were such a hit and so successful, partly because this is a nation at that time even strapped for food. This is right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, just years later, and who had been subsidizing North Korea. And so they had not adjusted yet, and their agriculture was being dismantled because central planning and communism doesn't work, frankly. And some of the dams and things they attempted just made things worse. So these chocolate pies were selling on the black market for $10 a piece. Now, $10 is an enormous amount of money in North Korea. It's an enormous amount of money just to get a moon pie anywhere you live. And so the North Korean establishment got wind of what was going on and decided to put a kibosh on the pie incident and shut down the factory. And so in response to that, South Koreans went to the DMZ and they had these long cylinder hot air balloons. They look like these long, clear trash bags almost, very long tubes that you might see in front of a place selling cars. You know, those tubes that they put arms on them and the men bend back and forth in the wind. They're sort of shaped like that. And they fastened bags and baskets to that filled with choco pies and sent them up into the air and let the wind carry them into North Korea. And North Korean soldiers were actually shooting balloons and grabbing the pies, and it was causing dissension within the ranks. And you have to sit back and go, wow, this is where we are. This is how bad it is. We've got soldiers shooting air balloons full of chocolate pies because there are people on the other side so desperate to get their hands on them, not only because of the food shortage, but also because it was a bit taboo. It was anything from South Korea or anything from anywhere other than North Korea is kind of neat. And, you know, they'd save the packages and they would eat the pies. And now you can even be punished if you're found with the wrappers of the pies. And they also mixed in there some pamphlets for South Korean propaganda, etc. So that was the pie or the cookie incident, the cookie affair. And you got to look at that and just feel like, wow, these people are really desperate. Now, this is all before Kim Jong-un. This is with Kim Jong-il. He passed away. His son comes to power, kills his brother-in-law, who turned out to be a CIA asset anyway, but has been working with the Trump administration on trying to get a deal for sanction relief in exchange for a freeze of nuclear weapons. Now, the race for nuclear weapons was always just something that they did so that they could bargain it away in order to get sanction relief. Everyone saw what happened to Libya. Gaddafi abandoned his nuclear weapons program, and then once the Suez Canal was reopened and he was sort of flirting with the gold dinar, and Libyan ships were allowed to go east to China and India, and Iranian ships were also allowed to come through the Suez, There was an intervention led by the Europeans with America leading behind. Gaddafi was murdered, sodomized by a knife. Hillary Clinton laughed about it, as did her interviewer. And the whole country was flipped up on its head and handed over to Al-Qaeda. It got so bad that by 2012, there was actually an open-air slave market. So way to go, Obama and Hillary Clinton. You made slavery great again in North Africa. Human beings were sold into slavery in 2012 because of the toppling of Gaddafi by the Obama/Clinton regime. But you don't see virtue signalers pulling their hair out about that. No, they go after Trump. And there's plenty of reasons to criticize Trump, but it's all the wrong reasons that seem to hit the airwaves, like Russian collusion or whatever language he used, or he said something rude. And Bernie Sanders recently called him a racist in the Democratic debates. He called the president a racist. I think Trump can be criticized for a lot, but I wouldn't label him a racist. And I think that's dangerous because it's labels like that which embolden terrorist groups like WISIS, the white ISIS, also known as Antifa, to assault people because they feel like, well, if you're a racist, then you're not really a person. You're basically a Nazi, and we use violence to get rid of the Nazis, so we can use violence on basically anyone we don't like, which happened in Portland recently, and I'll cover that story in a bit. But calling the president a racist is baffling to me, that because Bernie Sanders is the senator that supported sanctions on Iraq after knowing hundreds of thousands of children had starved to death. He supported, co-sponsored the attack on Libya, which led to actual slavery and the deaths of thousands of Africans. And some of whom were gay, some of whom were female, some of whom were black, some of whom were Arab. Bernie Sanders' policies have led to actual death, rape, and starvation of minorities and women and homosexuals. But he wants to pontificate and label all the isms on the president. Racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, etc. You hear it all the time. It's like a broken record. And yet, the policies of these Democrats, and of everyone anyway, a lot of these neocons too, they're allied in this fight, lead to death and destruction, aiding Al-Qaeda in Syria. Bernie Sanders said Assad must go, that he's murdered 400,000 people. He's completely toting the same line as a John McCain. And that gets ignored. See that? Well, at least he's not saying grab her by the hoo-hoo. I'd rather deal with the foul language and complete lack of tact of, frankly, a pompous and arrogant New Yorker than I would someone whose policies are actually leading to war, which Trump has yet to start. Came close to doing it in Iran. Pulled back, though. He's surrounded by the worst people. He's very bad at picking people. Well, he didn't really pick them. Sheldon Adelson picked them. We know this. I call him Sheldon Adelson sometimes. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, but they pay to play. And John Bolton is one of these figures. So when it came to Hanoi, getting back to Korea, this is what happens. They reach an agreement on denuclearization. Korea's offered up its sites. It even offered up the sites it thought the U.S. didn't know about. And everything seems to be fit. The U.S. walked in there with a very high benchmark, thought they'll never reach this level. And surprise, surprise, Korea agrees. So what? Oh, we'll just keep raising the bar. We'll just raise the bar until it's impossible for you to meet it. So Bolton came in there saying, we want you to account for your chemical weapons and biological weapons, and we want to inspect where you live. This is like the palaces of Saddam, right? Like, yeah, we really want inspectors looking under my bed. That's how you get assassinated. And so the Koreans said no. And then they all had to walk away. Trump has allowed Bolton, especially Pompeo, etc., to bully him. He's got Kushner with his snake-like tongue in his ear, whose father, by the way, is a convicted felon, Charles Kushner, convicted of, well, several things. One was illegal campaign finance shenanigans, as well as setting up honey traps. which he did for his own brother-in-law, as well as the former governor at the time, Governor McGreevey of New Jersey, set him up with a closet or a homosexual Israeli named Golan Sapel, who the governor cheated on his wife with, and then came out with a Kevin Bacon-style defense, or I should say, well, not Kevin Bacon, Kevin Spacey. Kevin Bacon didn't do anything. Kevin Spacey used the McGreevey defense. Oh, I'm so courageous as being a gay man. Please excuse all my crimes, including molestation, etc. It all goes away because, well, you're not allowed to criticize any kind of minority opinion, group, category in the United States without being accused of ism, ist, and est, and phobias. It's ridiculous. Identitarian politics is running amok. And you saw that very clearly in the debates, both sets of debates, with the exception of a couple candidates. I wouldn't put that on Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard, but all the rest of them were pandering to the Twitter crowd, I guess you could call them. I mean, it got to the point where I was like, press 2 for English. There was a point in the second debate where one of the moderators, and they're not moderators, these are MSNPC, full-on libtard, extremists, who said, raise your hand if your tax plan covers free health care for illegals. Not for immigrants, for illegals, for illegal immigrants. Either way you shake it, it doesn't matter. I mean, and all of them raised their hands. Even Yang. Tulsi wasn't in that debate. There are so many Americans, as you know, myself included, where I just still live there as part of why I don't, who have a hard time paying their own health care, health insurance, and God forbid if somebody gets cancer or something serious, it doesn't matter how much you have because you're going to lose it all because they have different prices depending on how much your income is. The more you have, the more you pay. How are these people, especially working class people, supposed to now pay for immigrants, especially illegals, for basically the entire world to have health care? The Democrats are in love with what sounds good, but not with what works. And nobody had the courage to challenge them on that because all the moderators are super left-wing. Rachel Maddow's up there, she's hooked on Russiagate. Never talk about Israeligate, by the way. And all they did was pander, and you thought, okay, health care for illegals. How can we go lower? Can we go lower? Sure we can. We're also going to have the state pay for transgender abortions, which is physically impossible because men pretending to be women, fine, you can change your name and you can wear what you consider to be feminine. Being feminine is not the same as being female. That's where the line they don't understand. But you can't actually have a baby because you don't have eggs, you don't have a uterus, you're not really a woman no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you wish or think it. A man that gets a sex change is just somebody who is a man who castrated himself and maybe got a fake, not sure what they do down there, but it's not going to have babies. But rather than anyone saying, what the heck are you talking about? People just clapped and yeah, let's do that too. I don't think there should be an audience at these debates. I mean, they make it worse because they're just pandering to the crowd, pandering to a pop, and that is the problem with both parties. I'm just picking on the Democrats right now because that's the party that just had debates, but they sat up there going completely nuts, trying to showboat each other on the most extreme leftist positions. And when one congresswoman brings up bringing our troops home and saving trillions of dollars, the only person that actually had a plan to pay for all these social programs they pontificate about, Tulsi Gabbard, says, well, we could save trillions. That's not billions, trillions with the T if we brought our troops home. And they're going to jump on her for that. I hear the music coming, so I'll shut my yipping for a bit, and we'll see you after the break. Konnichiwa, or aloha. This is Ryan Dawson filling in for Mike Rivero. I have a caller on the line. I do want to reiterate something that was said there in the ad. Do go to republicbroadcasting.org and get your donations in there. We are facing massive censorship across the web. I have Tony from Puerto Rico who called and sat through the break, but I guess he just dropped. We'll call back if you, Tony, if you are still listening. I'm sorry I didn't catch that when I think he was on hold for a while. I didn't catch that. I'm going through my news and trying to fill in 3 hours, and I missed that from RBN, but my eye is on the ball now, so I'll be catching it when you call in. The number to call in is 800-313-9443. And Tony, I'm sorry I missed your call. If you call back, I'll get you immediately. I've got it all set up correctly now, so my apologies. I am the substitute. I am not the normal host for the show. The normal host, of course, is the great Mike Rivero. Been doing this probably longer than I'm alive. He's just taking a little bit of time off, I think, from illness. So I'm going to try and fill in and do the best that I can. I was talking about the Democrat debates, and we were also talking about John Bolton in the first half of the show, the defective human product, as they like to call him. And he completely lost it at the New York Times, and he insisted that there was no plan ever discussed with him or any idea that he had ever heard of that suggested that there would be a freeze rather than a complete dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear weapons, which means that Bolton is now being left out of the loop, which I can't think of any better news than that, because John Bolton should not be involved in negotiations with North Korea or anyone else. He nearly just started a war with Iran. He was drooling at both sides of his mouth to try and get a war with Venezuela earlier in the year, which didn't go through. Who, by the way, Justin Raimondo, before he passed, correctly predicted that entire situation. It's one of the last columns that he wrote. It's still on antiwar.com if you want to go check out Justin's work. The man was always a crystal ball. I'd say 99% of the time he got things right ahead of everyone else, and sometimes he was one of the only people talking about it. He's one of the very few. There was Justin Raimondo, Mike Rivero, actually, myself, Jim Loeb, who talked about the Office of Special Plans before the Iraq War started. I talk about this neocon clique that basically stovepiped and fabricated all these lies about WMDs. You probably memorized them now, the Niger forgeries, which, by the way, there's new information about Grant Smith from IRMEP, the Institute for Middle East Research, Middle Eastern Policy and Research, has issued a FOIA and has over 600 pages worth of documents from the FBI about the Niger forgery case. And yes, it does talk a bit about Michael Adine and Ghorbanifar of Iran-Contra fame, all the things we said, but it's nice to have even further verification of these things. And then, of course, they lied about mobile weapons labs and aluminum tubes and so forth with Judith Miller and William Safire and so on, and led to a war in Iraq. The same can be said for Syria. The same can be said for Iran. At first, with these boat bombings, my first inkling was maybe that was a false flag. Could have been Saudi Arabia using MEK as a proxy. It could have even been Iran. Maybe they really did do it, saying, hey, look, if you're going to knock our oil trade down to zero, then we're going to close the Strait of Hormuz, and we're not afraid to bomb your boats. But and that is a hypothesis that is out there. But why that doesn't make sense to me is, one, they already shot down a drone and say, yeah, we did it. But why attack a Japanese boat while you're in the middle of negotiating with the Japanese prime minister who's in Iran for the first time in 41 years? You could just say, no, don't bother coming. But they invited him. They talked to him. They were talking about sanction relief, and then suddenly a Japanese boat is attacked. And if you notice, they said that the owner of the boat and the 21-member Filipino crew on the boat, which is not uncommon, by the way, carrying methanol, not oil, as has been incorrectly reported a little bit, said that the ship was hit above the waterline. Now, mines actually can still hit above the waterline, but usually not, but not impossible. But they wanted to say, oh, maybe it came from something above. Maybe a drone or a ship or somebody shot at them. This would have been fitting with the Israeli propaganda that Iranian fishing boats were being mounted with missile launchers. which is the kind of rhetoric you get from some civilian that learned about warfare from playing video games, not even good video games, because that doesn't make, if you know anything about military hardware, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I think the part about the sharks, the robot sharks with laser eyes and the anti-Semitic rape dolphins got admitted last minute because that was such a ridiculous story. But where did this intel come from? It came from the Israelis. How do we know? Because one, Newsweek slipped up about it and admitted that that's where the intel came from. And also the New York Times reported about it and let it slip that, well, the Israelis are saying A, B, and C. And this was one of the lies. Oh, that was a quick break. Well, I'll explain how we're hearing the Iraq War propaganda 2.0 with Iran, and it's all Bolton, Pompeo, and the neocons' faults again. It's Iraq, 9/11, PNAC, all released to Israel, replace Iraq with Iran, same rhetoric, rinse and repeat. See you after the break. Aloha. Konnichiwa. This is Ryan Dawson of the ANC Report, the Anti-Neocon Report, filling in for Mike Rivero for his What Really Happened show. I've done it before in the past. I'm a longtime listener and supporter of Mike Rivero. I hope all of you guys will also support the Republic Broadcasting Network at RBN. That's who makes these shows possible. The number to call in, should you like to, or you can Skype in as well, but the number to call is 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. And I'll be taking your calls as they come in. I'm sorry I missed one that somebody called during the break. That's how it is. We've been talking about first a quick history of U.S. Korea relations regarding to North Korea. We talked about John Bolton, the defective mustache, who's essentially an agent of Israel, and Pompeo. He's in the same boat. And we were getting into a little bit of Iraq War history, the Democratic debates, and I wanted to come back to the point with Tulsi Gabbard, but I'll finish up with Bolton a little bit because he is my favorite punching bag now that McCain is no longer with us. John Bolton is the inside man that Sheldon Adelson set up on the same day that they got Donald Trump to pardon Lewis Libby. Lewis Libby was, of course, Dick Cheney's chief of staff. He got disbarred, actually, for his role in the Plame affair. And he was one of the principal neoconservative architects that led to the Second War in Iraq, along with lovelies like Richard Pearl and Paul Wolfowitz and Douglas Feith, Michael Adine, Wormser, and others from the PNAC clique. Well, the new PNAC is probably this group called CEP, and they're not as brazen or as asinine as PNAC. PNAC was arrogant enough to publish all their talking points and think tank papers online. They really hadn't dealt with the online world for ever. And they didn't anticipate people, like regular people, digging in and reading those things. So usually that just didn't happen. But that was because of lack of access. But because of people like Mike Rivero and Justin Raimondo, who dug in and did go through it, we found their papers. And there's an article I wrote called Iraq 9/11 PNAC, All Roads Lead to Israel, in which you could almost just replace Iraq with Iran and everything would still hold true. They've got their lies, but this time they're doing it in secret. And what happened, I'll tell you how we know in a bit, but back in 2017, the Israelis and the U.S. made a working group in secret that it does not publish things online like PNAC does. But what this group does do is they laid out something akin to the McCollum Memo, the 8-point plan that dragged the U.S. into war with Japan, and put it out for Iran. And it's very similar in that what was the straw that broke the camel's back for the Japanese was, of course, the oil embargo, which led to the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And the way most Americans even know that there was an oil embargo on Japan isn't from history class or books. It's from the movie The Godfather, when Sonny was arguing with his compadres there and said, well, maybe we shouldn't have put the oil embargo. That's how people heard about it, through a film, because our schools are at that level. And then they know what to look for. So never underestimate the power of art. And of course, that's not what the movie was about at all. It was just a little side story in there. But that is where, honestly, many people learned about that. That has happened with Iran. They said they were going to uh, rip up the Iran deal and put sanctions on Iran. But if you really look at it, there never was an Iran deal because, yeah, there was a deal, but not for the Americans because the Obama administration always found some excuse or another saying, well, you just haven't continued to not build nuclear weapons hard enough yet. So we're not going to unfreeze your assets. We're not going to give you sanction relief. We're not going to allow business relationships to occur until you continue to disprove a negative, which is not possible. And so they would have a deal in place, but only on paper because there's always an excuse where they would kick the can down the road and say, okay, we'll revisit this again in 6 months. And if you comply to all that, then this time, Charlie Brown, you can kick the football. 6 months would come and Lucy would yank the football out of the way and say, oh, you haven't done this. And so we still can't unfreeze your assets and you still can't trade. And so there never really was an Iran deal. Trump officially scrapped it. But something that was in place were these waivers that were allowing the continuation, at least for energy trades, because not allowing that punished our Asian and European allies. Now, there were plenty of restrictions on airliners and any other kind of business you can imagine, but liquefied natural gas and oil were something that were still on the maritime Silk Road. That all ended on May 1st/May 2nd. And I say that because the time zones, May 2nd over here is May 1st over there. And so the waiver program ends, and then things go kaboom in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, this was part of the memo from this working group. We have to cut off the energy flow and trade all the way down to zero. So you can see these little neoconservative and their allies just loving this, walking back and forth with glee. We're going to shut down Iran's economy. They tried everything else on Iran. I mean, ever since the revolution in 79, a year and a half later, they're at war with Iraq for 8 years. And then there was Stuxnet and assassination of Iranian scientists and MEK, and then the trouble in Baluchistan, and they had Arab separatists shoot up a military parade. And now you have weird boat bombings on Iran's allies, which didn't make sense. Norway and Japan, right? And then there's the drone downing. So they flew a drone into Iranian airspace, and they had a P-8 aircraft behind that one with American passengers on it. But Iran was clever. They shot down the unmanned drone, which was spying on their air defense system, trying to figure out the grid. But they did not hit the P-8. They let it go because they knew American casualties would sound the emotional alarm bell, and that's where the story would start. And because they like to start stories in the middle, it's just like any time in Palestine that Israel goes and bombs them, they always start with whatever Hamas most recently did and nothing that happened before it. And obviously don't talk about the occupation, the house demolitions, the blockade, the sniper shooting kids. That's all taboo, right? You can't see me right now, but I'm wearing a Boycott Israel t-shirt. Just sent one in the mail to Mike as well. So that's how they treat Iran, and that's how the American media treats Iran, and Iran knows this. It's not like Press TV and RT are going to fight back against the weight of the CNN, BCB, SAB, whatever. They're all the same, three-letter networks, Fox 2. And so they didn't take the bait. And the neocons are upset. What are we going to do? They shot down the drone, and they shot it in Iranian airspace. The U.S. denies that, says, oh, no, it was in international waters. And then Iran produces film saying, no, it wasn't. Here it is. And here's video footage to prove it. And so they're eating crow, and they don't know what to do. But you have to look back at this and say, well, where do these lies come from? Why are there sanctions on Iran in the first place? It's not Saudi Arabia. And believe me, Saudi Arabia is guilty of plenty of other things, starving kids in Yemen, and they're monsters, and they supported Al-Qaeda in Syria, and they are involved in 9/11, as was Israel. But that is not who led and created these lies. These are Zionist lies. It wasn't Saudi Arabia that went to the UN with a cartoon bomb, a wild coyote bomb, saying, Iran is building nuclear weapons and 90% enrichment. I mean, Bibi Netanyahu's the one that did that. The same guy that went to the UN and said he could guarantee that invading Iraq would have positive reverberations throughout the region. I wonder what he meant by positive. Did he just mean in Israel's interest? Because nothing positive came of that. And no, it wasn't for oil or the petrodollar. I'm sorry to say, but go look at exports from Iraq to the United States before and after the war. They don't change at all. You know which ones did? The ones to Israel. Israel got 77% of its oil imports from the Kurdish-controlled region of Iraq. You can Google that. Forbes magazine, 77% oil to Israel from Iraq, and you can see it yourself. That is whose oil that war was for. Not ours. Not in American interest to get rid of Saddam Hussein. It was in Israel's interest to get rid of Saddam Hussein. It wasn't BP lying about WMDs. It was the OSP. It was a bunch of Zionists, and it's a bunch of Zionists lying about Iran. The entire pretext that got us into this situation for whether they fired on boats or not is because of the sanctions on oil and gas. And why are there sanctions on Iran? Because of the excuse that Iran is building nuclear weapons and enriching uranium, which you have to do up to 90%, by the way, for an atomic bomb. They're not even near 20%, which you need for medical isotopes. They're down there around 3%. And that, just like the IAEA cleared Iraq, they've cleared Iran, exact same playbook, okay? But it's the Israelis that went there with their mock bomb and accused Iran of this, and Iran is put in a position to prove in a negative, to prove they're not doing something, which is not possible. You can allow all the inspectors, they can close down sites, they've bent over backwards, they've met all the demands. The U.S. doesn't care because it's just a pretext. They know they're not building a bomb. That's just the propaganda to justify the sanctions. And who made this propaganda? Israel. It's always Israel. Just like Iraq, just like Syria. You know who wrote the clean break paper? Richard Pearl. You know that infamous list of countries to bomb that Wesley Clark talked about? He said the aid brought it from upstairs to downstairs. Whose office is upstairs? Whose was Defense for Policy? Richard Pearl. Richard Pearl wrote that list of countries to invade, and Richard Pearl wrote the clean break paper for a foreign head of state while working in the American government. And what's it say? It's saying, well, after Iraq, because that's the main thing, is get rid of Saddam Hussein, we'll go into Syria. And we can foster sectarian infighting and yada and everything that happened. The whole script. And he's just reiterating an even older plan from Oded Yanan, which was translated into English, from the 80s, which said every Arab-on-Arab conflict is a benefit for Israel and how they had to topple Iraq, get rid of Saddam Hussein, and then onward and upward. They were going to go through Syria, Lebanon, crush Hezbollah, which had just formed as resistance to the Israelis. Reagan had enough sense to get out of there and get out of Beirut. But this is what we're dealing with. The real parasite, the real meddler in U.S. elections isn't Russia. It's not even Saudi Arabia. It's Israel. That's the parasite. They all go and kiss the ring at AIPAC. And when Al Jazeera did this undercover expose on the lobby, both in the UK and the US, there are two films you need to see. It got censored from Al Jazeera. They weren't allowed to release it. So they make a movie about the power of the lobby, and then the lobby essentially proves that by not allowing them to air it. So they leaked it and it went online. And this is why it's important to safeguard the internet. And this is also pretty much dovetails, or, well, that's the wrong expression, but it pretty much is very similar to Project Veritas's expose on Google. Because they went in and found out Google executives have a total political bias to not let 2016 happen again. So whether you like Trump or not, if you are interested in having free and fair democracy, you can't have a tech giant deciding, oh, we don't like this team, we don't like conservatives or Republicans, we can't allow that to happen again, and we're going to use our power of censorship to guarantee this. So on June 5th, they deplatformed and demonetized a swath of conservatives, libertarians, anti-war, just whoever they felt like. I got caught up in that. They deleted my entire YouTube in February. They deleted my entire YouTube again the March before that, March of 2018. And they deleted it way back in December of 2008. And guess who helped me rebuild my channel? Mike Rivero and WhatReallyHappened.com. They were the only ones reaching out. All that work I'd done from 2006 to basically 2009, December of 2008, was gone. They erased everything. And that was the same day the ADL partnered with YouTube. The ADL and the SPLC, its little attack dog, are the ones that go around just saying anything anti-war or anything anti-Zionist is hate speech, and they get it censored from the web. If we don't have a vibrant internet to debunk the war propaganda, then you have nothing debunking the war propaganda, because the entirety of televised news are cheerleaders, with a couple exceptions. One of them is Tucker Carlson, who, by the way, completely supported the war in Iraq. But he has seen the light, he has matured, he's gotten better, and he is talking since, relative to the rest of the talking heads at least, about Iran. Say, no, we don't, that would be a disaster. And it would be. And Tulsi Gabbard pointed this out. Look, Iran's got 80 million people. That would be the biggest conflict since World War II that the U.S. has ever challenged. Bigger than Vietnam. It would be the biggest challenge. And they also have leverage of the Strait of Hormuz. They could close that down, which would cut off the flow of oil and gas from Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and of course Iran itself, because they don't have the pipelines in place for land routes. And so that would cause a global crisis. I mean, even just a day of holding all that, just one 24-hour period, you're talking skyrocketing oil prices, and it's unfathomable what would happen in Europe. Look at what France is doing now with the yellow vests over just small tax increases and hikes in gas. Imagine what would happen if the Strait of Hormuz was closed and there was no more oil from the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, or Saudi Arabia, which is the biggest oil exporter. It's impossible. But why would we do this? Hey, America could deal with it, because America gets a majority of its oil from itself, Canada, Mexico, and it's not from overseas. Only 12% comes from overseas. Only 1% of U.S. electricity is oil. Majority of U.S. electricity is made from coal, 51%, and the next biggest chunks are from nuclear and hydro. And so, yeah, the U.S. could kind of take one on the chin for a little bit, but Europe couldn't. Asia couldn't. And it was just not in American interest to do this. But Israel would love it. They're not buying oil from Iran, obviously. Do not let these parasites lead us into another war. Be right back after the break. I am Ryan Dawson. Aloha, konnichiwa. I'm filling in for Mike Rivero for the What Really Happened show. I'm just subbing. Might be subbing on Friday as well. The number to call is 800-313-9443. That number again is 1-800-313-9443. They'll put you in, and if you're overseas, I believe you can also hit up RBN2 on Skype, if you have Skype, which is what I'm using now from Japan. We have been talking about shenanigans of John Bolton, first in North Korea and now on Iran. John Bolton met with the Israeli group that I was talking about before the break, and is paid by them through several conduits. He doesn't try to hide it very well, because this moron actually tweeted about meeting with the security advisor Meir bin Sabit when they were supposed to not be having a meeting. So it was a secret meeting. John Bolton gets on Twitter and says how much he's looking forward to talking about the close U.S.-Israeli strategic partnerships and tremendous ties of our governments and citizens of our two-eyed nations, yada, yada, yada. These people are dumb. And that basically led to the unraveling of the secretive working group. The memos have been released. There is financial report. All of John Bolton's financial records from 2015 to 2018 are up. They're on the Loeb log from Jim Loeb. They're also an A&C report. And in there, what I found interesting in Bolton's financial holdings, there are three that stuck out to me the most. There's a diamond offshore drilling company from Texas. There's Fox News, of course, Eden Springs, the Rowan Group, the Hamilton Society. That's a bad one. But the American Enterprise Institute, which is no shock, which is the same group that financed the Weekly Standard. That's the one who published all the lies about Iraq for PNAC. And then there's the Gatestone Institute, who is usually involved in supporting nefarious characters over in the UK, but they also prop up American neoconservatives and Zionists on this side of the pond as well. And they're giving the defective human product, the evil mustache, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Another one is the Counter Extremism Project, CEP, which is part and parcel of the UANI. It's the same members. Their board of directors overlap. It's all the same people. It goes right back to royal money from both the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And then when you add to that the advising and consulting or speaking fees he does with the Hamilton Society and Friends of Israel groups like Friends of the IDF, it's pretty clear that he's just part of this Zionist Wahhabi American neocon nexus, the ZWAN, we like to say. Taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from the American Enterprise Institute, a Zionist think tank, taking it from Gatestone Institute, which he was a chairman from. He was a chairman. Took $310,000. I'm going to get into his finances, and I'll explain what this means in the greater geopolitical picture right after the break. Thanks, Patrick, but it's not Mike Rivero today. This is Ryan Dawson filling in. And I hope Bruce from Texas is still on the line. I want to take your call. I'm sorry I didn't see you there. I was on a roll ripping on John Bolton, so that's what happens. How you doing?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yeah. Now the day goes by that I don't wish to hear that John Bolton suffered a aortic aneurysm or something. You know, it'll be good for the world, and that guy's dangerous.
I hope he dies of dehydration from chronic diarrhea, but that's my...
Diarrhea? Yeah. Could have grid, too. You never know if you look into his past. You don't...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm not going to try to bust your balls here or interrupt your role because you're doing good stuff, and you always have. All right? And but I just want to hit this subject and just see if you moved anywhere on it or not. I'm not going to try to change your mind. People, once they're entrenched, a lot of times it's difficult to reevaluate.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a firefighter paramedic the day 9/11 happened, and after that, about 2005, I got pulled into the 9/11 Truth Movement, and so I spent a lot of time looking at that Rubik's Cube from every angle I could, and one by one, I tossed away the disinformation. You had the Judy Woods and her space beam. You know. Yeah. Spencer outed her that she sent him an email, and it had an additional address to the ADL headquarters. So
I don't know, but whether that's true or not, but everything she said is ridiculous anyway.
Right. Well, you know, that kind of power to do that, where's the energy source? You know, none of her shields can answer that question, you know. And then it had the nanothermite, you know, you would probably have to fill up the entire building with nanothermite to explode it out, you know, blocks away. You know,
thermite just sort of eats through things. It doesn't throw beams hundreds of feet through the air.
Exactly. Well, but then we get to the planes there. Now, where are you at with the planes?
I'm a planer. There were planes.
Yeah, there were planes. There were morphine planes. There were planes that lost wings. There was a plane with the tire too small, with the engine too small. There was no bodies and no luggage. But you say there were planes. Okay.
There were airplanes. I mean, the people on those planes died. The plane that hit the Pentagon, they went and actually found the DNA of all the passengers other than the baby. It's sitting at Walter Reed. I don't think they got all the medics and pathologists and everybody involved to all lie to cover up what? There's no motive. Like, why not hit it with a plane? There are airplanes. There are actually more planes than the 4 planes that we're told about. There are planes that were hijacked on 9/13, where 10 people got arrested and 9 got released. They tried. There was 9/11 was almost a lot bigger than what it ended up being, and it was based on the Bojinka plot from Ramzi Youssef, who was involved in the World Trade Center bombing in 1993. And isn't it interesting that none of the talking heads on when 9/11 happened referred to the 93 incident with the exact same target, the World Trade Centers hit by terrorists? No, you know what they referred to? Pearl Harbor. Why? Because Pearl Harbor justified using nuclear bombs. So that was what they alluded to, not the 93 bombing. They went with World War II. They wanted everybody to forget what happened in 1993 because the FBI completely botched 1993. But yes, I'm on board with airplanes. I'm not an airplane denier or anything like that. I think what happens is they tried to turn 9/11 into a tar baby. They gave out so much.
You're a denier there. The denier that you sound like a Holocaust person there when you start using that word. That's
okay. Well, what would you like me to say? I believe there were airplanes rather than don't believe there were airplanes. I mean, fine. Even with Holocaust denial like that, I don't like that term either because it's not. I don't think anybody actually denies there was a Holocaust. I think there are people who argue about the numbers and stuff. I'll call them revisionists or whatever. But yeah, we should be more precise in language. I agree with that point. So let me walk that back and say I do believe there were airplanes, and I don't think admitting there were airplanes makes somebody some sort of government shill that believes in the quote-unquote official story. I've done plenty of work debunking 9/11, but I have not seen any convincing evidence to say that any of these planes didn't exist or were swapped out with some other plane or whatever.
Did you know a couple of the A numbers are still active years later?
A couple of the what?
The N numbers, the aircraft.
I don't believe that's true.
Yeah.
But
okay, well it is. I'll let you go. We'll agree to disagree on this.
All right, I disagree. Right. But thanks for your call. All right. This is a strange thing. When it comes to 9/11, that is a conspiracy that has more wackadoo nonsense associated with it than any of the surrounding events. And when it comes to the anthrax attack after 9/11, they don't want you to look at that because the anthrax note said death to America, death to Israel, and it is what was the legal pretext to go to war in Iraq, which was saying that they were violating a UN resolution 1441, which stipulated they couldn't have weapons of mass destruction. What kind of weapons of mass destruction? Well, one were biochemical weapons, anthrax and VX gas. And if you remember, it's Colin Powell, the Secretary of State at the time, went to the UN with a mock bottle of anthrax, held it up and pointed to cartoon pictures, and they had to be cartoons because these things didn't really exist, of mobile weapons labs, which Judith Miller and all the usual suspects said, oh, Iraq is producing anthrax in these mobile weapons labs. And why did she say that? Because there was a lie, and listen to my language here, a lie, not a mistake, a deception, that claimed that senior Iraqi officials had met in Prague where they received anthrax from Mohammed Atta, who would be a ringleader of 9/11. It was on Flight 11 that crashed into the north side of the North Tower. Except that didn't happen. There was no meeting in Prague, and Iraq didn't have anthrax, and guess who else didn't have anthrax? Al-Qaeda. The anthrax didn't come from Iraq. Didn't come from Mohammed Atta. It came from Fort Detrick, Maryland, in the U.S.'s own labs. It was genetically traced back to our own weapons labs. And they chased around Stephen Hatfield for a long time, then they chased around Bruce Ivins. He was suicided. Perry Mixel was suicided. Who ODs on Tylenol, right? Never had a trial. It was just over and done with. And then after Bruce was murdered/suicided, he was exonerated because he could not have done what they said he did in his lab. Plus, whoever sent the anthrax did so from the locations of Al-Qaeda cells in Florida and New Jersey. There's hoax anthrax from Florida and actual anthrax from New Jersey, next to where Al-Qaeda actually had been living and operating. But Bruce Ivins, unlike the Mossad, didn't live next to hijackers. And there are no airplane records of him flying back and forth to Florida and New Jersey from Maryland. And he could not have been in two places at once and could not have sent the anthrax, at least not alone. Most likely not at all. Because when you look at the notes and you look at the lies, it's pretty easy to figure out who made that up. Because the intelligence assessment of the Atta meeting, which was written about in PNAC with a picture of Osama bin Laden in the article, that later lied to link it to Saddam Hussein, was from James Woolsey. And James Woolsey, former DCI of the CIA, got his intel from, drumroll please, Israeli security forces. And that's in the London Times. That was in the New York Observer, which was owned by, guess who? Charles Kushner. That's who reports on anthrax. So they claimed that they witnessed a transfer of anthrax from Iraqis to Muhammad Atta in Prague. They could not have witnessed such a thing because there was no meeting in Prague, and Al-Qaeda didn't have any anthrax, and neither did Iraq. But after lying about that anyway, they went on and had Colin Powell go to the UN and George Tenet, and Louis Libby writes this speech about the mobile weapons labs and anthrax, and he went there holding a mock bottle of anthrax, and now that is the legal justification for the war. Everything else was extra. They lied about anthrax, but they don't want 9/11 Truth to look at anthrax. They want you to argue forever about physics. And, oh, look, this tower, Building 7, wasn't hit by a plane. It fell into its own footprint too fast. It fell at free fall speeds. I know that just by eyeballing it, whatever. Great, but that doesn't tell you what happened. It tells you what didn't happen, but you're no closer at all to figuring out who did it. But there is a plethora of evidence showing the connections of the Safari Club clique of Israeli intel and Saudi royals who were involved in 9/11, according to our own FBI. Justin Raimondo, who I mentioned earlier, who just passed a few days ago, he had an FBI investigation launched into him and his website because he had mentioned Dominic Suter, the owner of Urban Moving Systems of the Jiggling Juice, the dancing Israelis, who had fled to Israel. He was a official FBI suspect of 9/11. And that is on their list of 9/11 suspects. He published it because he found the unredacted copies of it, which were in Italian. They're also in Polish, and I found the Spanish copy out of Argentina. And they got all the names on there. He's right on there, right next to like Ahmad Zawahiri and Dominic Suter. Right? Ahmad Zawahiri is a Muslim Brotherhood cleric who is in jail with the blind sheikh, who becomes the mastermind later to recruit Salameh and Youssef and the boys involved in the 1993 World Trade Center attack, with a Ryder truck whose address goes back to an apartment shared with Josie Hadass, an Israeli agent. I guess they didn't think they were actually going to find a piece of the VIN number and find the truck and get the rental, and that, they didn't see that black swan coming. But why would an Israeli Mossad agent be living with Muslim Brotherhood plotters that blow up the World Trade Center? Gee, I wonder. Who would benefit from such a thing? Of course, they botched that operation. They did murder people, and they did injure a lot of people with the smoke, and it was a huge terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Would be superseded by the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, which again involved the FBI and Anaheim and Andre Strassmeyer, murdered Kenneth Turnadu's family members, and on with OKC. But that all got buried compared to 9/11. But if you really want to look into 9/11, look into all of it. And look at who were in and out of the towers. Who was it that got caught and thrown in jail for 10 years for illegally having a pass to do work on the basement levels of the World Trade Centers, dated September 5th, 2001. It's Sakir Hamad and Khalid Odala and his 6-member crew that were busted in Tennessee serendipitously for another scam that they were doing. Key witness of that event, Catherine Smith, is burned alive. FBI agent Susan Nash found the gasoline in her clothing, and this was arson. They murdered her the day before the trial. And all these men are in custody, which means somebody on the outside had to be supporting them. They had rented Aero trucks, which is the exact type of truck that Urban Moving System and these 5 other Israeli front companies were using to spray their logos on and do their fake furniture moving operation, which was shadowing Al-Qaeda and going everywhere they went. You had Joran Schmel, whose driver's license from Florida, who followed Atta around. They're living 3 miles away from him in Brooklyn. All right. You had Classic International Movers, Inc., which had moved Al-Omari from Florida to New Jersey. So not only are they following him around, they physically gave logistical support to Al-Qaeda hijackers. This is not a normal furniture moving company. And it's not just Urban Moving Systems. There were 6 more. Well, 5 in a way, because Urban had 2 divisions, Max Movers for long-distance moves and Urban Moving for shorter distances. Although that doesn't really pan out, too, because there's another Urban Moving System van caught coming back from, guess where? Shanksville, Pennsylvania. What's special about that place? That's Flight 93. What were they doing there? Don't know, but we do know this. Miraculously, we found a passport of Ziad al-Jarrah, and only the little corner was burned. Just amazing papers. Not impossible, but it's very improbable. But that's what they find. But that is the only evidence that he's on that plane. Even the airphone calls, and Alex Jones and the disinformation masters want to dismiss these and act like cell phones and don't want you to believe in calls, but the airphone calls, which are real, all of them say there were only 3 hijackers, not 4. And even on the black box, which was found, it didn't disappear and was played for the family members during the Moussaoui trial. We do have transcripts for it. The other hijackers on the plane do not refer to the pilot as Ziad al-Jarrah. And they know who's flying the plane. He's never mentioned by the passengers. He's not even mentioned by the other hijackers, even when all of them are screaming, "Praise Allah," at the end, moments before their death. His voice isn't on there. So you know what they do? They come out with a Hollywood movie about Flight 93, and they made sure it's Ziad al-Jarrah that's the hijacker, but it doesn't match the evidence. And let me tell you why this is important. Ziad al-Jarrah, a month and a half after 9/11, a couple of his family members were busted in Lebanon. What were they doing? They were Arab spies for the Israelis. Youssef al-Jarrah and Ali al-Jarrah. And Ali al-Jarrah, the older one, had been spying for Israel as an Arab spy, the Mizrahavim they call them, since the 80s on Hezbollah. And they raided his house and found his computer documents. I mean, they busted red-handed. It's in USA Today. It's in the papers. It's not on CNN. You're not going to see a former AIPAC employee, Wolf Blitzer, talk about it. But isn't that a big coinky-dink? A 9/11 hijacker, a pilot no less, allegedly, had 2 first cousins working as Israeli spies. And the only evidence they got that he's on the plane is they found his passport. And wow, there just happened to be an Urban Moving Systems van leaving the area. They lied to police because they got pulled over for speeding. They said they hadn't been in the New York area, and these idiots still had the receipts from the tolls they had passed through, proving that no, you had been in New York and New Jersey. And where were you going? Why are you going to Shanksville? Were you taking a couch and some tables all the way from Liberty Park or in New Jersey to Pennsylvania? And isn't the long distance move supposed to be under Max Movers, not Urban Movers? Isn't that what you just said? Wasn't that your excuse for the van that you caught coming back from Chicago? And I talked to him blue in the face about this stuff, and some of you are probably hearing this for the first time in your life. They don't want you to know what happened on 9/11, and that is why they just dump in the ridiculous to put you on a path to nowhere like a dog chasing its tail. You'll never figure it out because you're watching all these Jonestown talking points about, just time-wasting things. Now, I got some calls. I'm going to take Frank, Jim, and then Phil. So first, Frank from my state, North Carolina. How are you? Frank, if you're still on the line.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've not been following your commentary or analysis or anything for many years, really. But I remember you. I'm not on the internet, but I listen to all these shows on these call-in phone numbers that I have. But I remember you from MySpace. I was Defiant Misfit, causing all kinds of trouble back in 2006 to about 2011. Yeah,
way back on MySpace.
You probably don't remember me. Oh yeah, MySpace.
I barely remember MySpace.
Okay, yeah. Well, I remember you, but anyway, yeah, I remember when Alex Jones was the tip of the spear. He made his name on the 9/11 Truth Movement, and now his whole show and the people he surrounds himself with are a bunch of basically neocon patriotards who go on air officially saying they believe the official story of 9/11.
Yeah, Alex was calling for war with Venezuela recently. Oh, well, I got a break. Can you hold through? I'm sorry, I timed this wrong. All right, thanks, sir. Stellar song. Before the break, we had was Frank from North Carolina. Yes. Are you still there, sir?
Defiant Misfit. Yes.
Defiant Misfit. Yes.
Yeah.
The great state, the great Tar Heel State.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. But I had a question about a video clip that I think unless I'm misremembering it, that I used to watch. I used to see it a lot on the internet and whatnot of a plane hitting the building. But as long as you brought up Jones, though, am I misremembering that? I mean, wasn't he like the self-proclaimed leader of the 9/11 Truth Movement? I mean, I remember. That was predominantly the subject that he talked about, probably 40, 50, 60% of the time on all his shows.
Yeah, well, 9/11 Truth was actually a group on MySpace that myself and a guy named Tyler created. But then I was kicked off of MySpace July 4th, 2005, and had to start over. And so the group was taken over, and then he kind of hijacked that title, but he always talked about 9/11. I mean, he talked about Building 7 nonstop. That was his bread and butter for a long time, but he never really talked about 9/11. Like, I never saw someone talk for so long without telling you anything. It was the same thing every day. Like, oh, Building 7 fell too fast and stuff. Like, he didn't talk about who did it, didn't link it to how they used that to lie about Iraq or anything like that. It was just, he had on Loose Chains, and then he had Fetzer on, and then Judy Wood on later, and just, and people who believe in, like, lizard people and stuff. And so his role was to take something legitimate that people ought to question, ought to be skeptical, and just fill it with nonsense and, like, a little bit of truth so that you could discredit everything. And a lot of people that wanted to talk about 9/11 didn't, because they didn't want to be associated with Alex Jones, who in the same breath would be talking about, Ebola going airborne and whatever, and living in bunkers in New Zealand, and, the gay frogs and so on and so on.
Armored redoubts.
Yeah,
redoubts.
I lose track of all his nonsense.
He knew a lot of famous people, a lot of actors and billionaires that had planes always in the ready on the little private landing strips to take them away to their armored redoubts in New Zealand. Anyway,
James Cameron.
Yeah, it's just funny. The Alex Jones of that time period would not get along with the Alex Jones of today. I mean, they espouse totally different points of view on everything, totally at odds with one another. I mean, he's become the enemy that he used to fight. He's become what he used to. Yeah,
one of the things he used to go on and on about was, don't fall for this two-party paradigm. That was his little nickel and dime phrase, like, two-party paradigm. It doesn't matter, left versus right. But now he's just a hardcore right-winger. I mean, he's exactly what he used to despise. But that,
I have a quick question. I want to make sure.
Go ahead.
Well, I get into these conversations. I chose never to get into the infighting over all the little, ideas about what brought the buildings down. I kind of studied it all, kept it at arm's length. I'm very skeptical unless I can, because I have a background as an actual investigator, a professional investigator. So, I mean, I know about chain of custody and everything. If somebody just tells me, well, did you know that the planes were in service years after 9/11? I'm like, well, that's very interesting. And if that's true, that's very compelling. But I have to see that. I have to see the records for myself.
You really think the government would be so stupid to reuse a plane that's supposed to have blown up? I mean,
well, I don't know. They're pretty stupid, but anyway,
they're pretty dumb. But that's like too dumb.
Well, there's this one video that I remember watching, and I always believed in the planes, and I always believed that it was like I always guessed it was a Global Hawk that hit the Pentagon, dressed up, painted up like an airline or something. But there was this one video, though. Don't I remember there was one video where it showed the plane hitting, and then it showed the nose cone and the cockpit of the plane coming out the other side of the building? Wasn't there a video like that?
It's not the nose cone. It's some of the landing gear goes through because they didn't put the wheels down because they're not interested in landing, and one of the engines. And it went all the way down to the ground, and there's pictures of it. They found it. So it's not the nose that goes through. People assumed it's the nose. The nose would have been smashed on the outer wall, but the landing gear right behind the nose, which is made of a steel frame, that could have popped out if it didn't hit any beams. It's possible, but I believe what went all the way to the ground was one of the engines.
Okay,
based on the fact that they found an engine on the ground. So yeah,
okay, well, I'd have to go back and look at the video again. It's been too long. But one last question: do you think Trump knows who did 9/11?
No, he has no, he's
really?
Clueless. Yeah,
he's really a stupid person. He's like the perfect patsy puppet clown, huh?
I mean, he's not as dumb as people think, but he kind of knows, like, okay, Al-Qaeda did 9/11, which they sort of did in a way, just not by themselves. And so he's against them, at least. Like, he did withhold CIA support for Al-Qaeda in Syria back in 2017, but...
Well, the Al-Qaeda was the base, right? I mean, that was CIA.
Oh, well,
okay,
I'll
thank you.
explain in a second. Well, after the break, and I got to get these two other callers, so I appreciate your time. Aloha, or konnichiwa. This is Ryan Dawson filling in for Mike Rivero. We got 4 callers waiting on the line, but I'm going to bump one up to the front because we've got Alex Jones from the Bohemian Grove on the line. What's up, Alex?
Hey, listen here, Dawson. I want you to know that the Illuminati, communist, Chinese, deep state, globalist, elite, Luciferian, interdimensional, psychic, demon, 4D chess playing team is here, and all you need to do is buy my cognitive alpha interrupter and tangy tangerine from the NWO to protect you from the forces of the Bohemian, hedonistic, Bilderberg, pizza party, gun confiscation, Jade Helm, FEMA overlords. Lizard people need light apply. The Ebola-infested shapeshifters of the owl-worshipping death cult are welcome. 1776. All
right, Alex, calm down. I'm just going to have to cut you off there. You're talking nonsense. We're going to go to Jim in Michigan instead. How are you, Jim? If you're still on the line.
Just fine, thank you. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I was, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, what's on your mind?
Well, I was going to talk to you about the thermite, okay? I've done quite a bit of extensive research on, and I must say that a lot of the things you said, on the program so far, I had no idea about, and I'm very surprised. I'm pretty well researched, but if I may say that there is a YouTube video. It is called "Amongst the Rubble," and there was a reporter out there with this cameraman after the 2 towers collapsed, and it's down a road that you can see it goes right to the World Trade Center 1 and 2. And you look at all the vehicles there, and you have buses, you have trucks and everything, and they're all scorched. I mean, there's no tires on fire. Whatever happened to the World Trade Center when it exploded, because it was imploded, okay, actually went down to those pyroclastic clouds that they talked about, went down that road and just incinerated every single thing that was flammable in all those vehicles.
Actually, they towed a bunch of vehicles out of the parking garages and set them up on the adjacent streets. There is evidence for explosives in the basement levels of the World Trade Center. Police found a van with explosive devices reported by Pat Dawson and Rick Sanchez on the morning of 9/11. Explosive device in a van. It fits with the vans we found later packed with explosives on the George Washington Bridge. We know where these vans came from. We know who drove those vans. We have the contract for Zim Shipping leaving, breaking a $50,000 lease, by the way, and relocating to Norfolk weeks before 9/11 occurs. This isn't a mystery. That's why I'm like baffled by why. I don't care if it's thermite or C4 or RDX or TNT or exploding bunny rabbits. It doesn't matter. There were people caught in a van full of explosives. And it's just derp to me for people to sit there with their nose on the ground looking like, was it just kerosene or gasoline or maybe thermite or maybe, who cares? Don't you want to know who did it? If someone set your house on fire, do you care whether they use a lighter or a match? What matters is who burned your house down. Who burned our house down? We've got foreign nationals caught with explosives.
Let's talk about actually what happened in the building, though. And the firefighters were in the basement. They say that the steel was going like lava flow, okay? So this looks like thermite, okay? But there was 7 scientists in Copenhagen that did an actual analysis.
Metal, not steel. A lot of other metals in the building besides steel.
I understand that, but the point I'm trying to make is that the 7 scientists from Copenhagen did an analysis of the dust, okay, that settled after the World Trade Center explosions, said that there was nanothermite in there, and there was one thing that you said I maybe disagree a little bit with. Because
that's meaningless? Because thermite is nothing but rust and aluminum mixed together, and to find that on nano levels is like being shocked to find broken glass in concrete. So, of course there is.
No.
Just had aluminum planes fly into a... Yes.
Well, why don't you listen to what I have to say?
Fine. I've heard it a
Why
million
don't you
times.
listen to
Go ahead. Go ahead. Talk about thermite.
All right.
Talk about... No one's heard about thermite before. Let's learn about thermite.
Okay, well, you're really aggressive, and you know what?
Yeah, because I'm tired of you guys. I do all this work on who did 9/11. You're just like, maybe there's thermite. Fine, there's thermite. Okay, there's thermite. Great. Now what? They used thermite. Thermite was one of the cutters. Let's say it was. So what? Now what?
You be quiet for a moment. The whole point is nanothermite is different than thermite, and the scientist was saying that nanothermite is built from the atom up, which means is very small, and the only place that actually produced nano aluminum was a Navy laboratory. You know, you are so close-minded that you don't even want to know what the hell's going on. And you know what?
No, I've heard all this, and I've debunked all this.
I know what you're saying, but you know what? You're argumentative, and you're going, I don't want to hear your point because I'm totally right. You know what? Kiss my ass, bitch.
Okay, go kiss your own ass, bitch. Get off the air. Phil from Florida, please don't be retarded.
Yeah, Ryan, this is July, the month of the moon landing. Do you believe we walked on the moon?
I didn't walk on the moon. I believe Buzz and company.
Neil Armstrong walked on the moon?
Yes, I don't deny the moon landing. Are you of a different opinion on the moon landing?
No, I think it's totally fake, but I was wondering what your opinion is. Do you believe we walked on the moon? Do you believe the United States astronauts walked on the moon?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you believe that those towers were empty? I do. I think the towers were completely empty, and I think they were emptied out in '93 when the first bomb went off. And I think the whole thing is fake. A lot more people are believing that this thing is fake.
The day before. What do you mean empty?
The whole thing is fake, Ryan.
You mean like
it's
no
a TV
furniture,
show.
no
you
people?
Can go back and watch it on. You can watch 9/11 on the internet anytime you want. It's a TV show.
Oh, okay. All right, you're done. Next, HB from Tennessee.
I just wanted the motor, the engine off the plane that they found on the sidewalk. That wasn't the engine off of that plane, and I saw a picture of it. It didn't even break the concrete that it fell on. Anyway, that's just one thing I want to bring up. the big thing about 9/11 is there weren't any planes that hit anything that day. You can look at the Pentagon. There was no leftover of a plane there.
Next. There is a big plane-sized hole in the Pentagon. I swear, you people, this is why no one wants to talk about 9/11. You discredit everything. Adam Fitzgerald.
Good evening, Ryan Dawson. How are you?
Good evening. I'm good. You hear me dealing with kooks?
It's exasperating to say the least.
I haven't heard the buildings were hollow yet. That was a new one.
Actually, no. I've heard that before. And it came from somebody named Brian Staberly. He's on Facebook. He runs a little podcast, and he's actually the first person that ever mentioned that to me and Ed Brotherton one day, and I blocked him immediately. I won't deal with stuff like that.
Imagine my lack of shock that somebody that thinks 9/11 is all a TV program also denies the moon landing.
They all have that one commonality in symmetry, actually, because
I want to ask,
do
you think the Earth is round? Because if they don't say yes, it's like, all right, our conversation's done right now.
Right, no, for sure. And they all share that conspiracy-minded symmetry. Like, most of those people are also Sandy Hookers as well. I mean, they don't believe nobody died at Sandy Hook.
I know.
A lot of these people are chemtrailers themselves, and, everything's off the table.
Anything paranoid is their bill.
Yeah, I think it's absurd, and I mean I know you deal with it every day, but so do I.
I just sat there for like 30 minutes explaining how they lied us into war in Iraq using this information about 9/11. Specifically, went into how one of the hijackers had family members in Israeli intelligence. They're like, yeah, but what about thermite?
Yeah, that's cool about the thermite. Like, first of all, the physics itself has dominated the 9/11 spectrum for over like 15 years. And that was the reason why I studied the geopolitical itself. I just found myself to be saying, that's a dead end. And I talk to David Chandler, Wayne Cosby, and Ken Jenkins sometimes, and I think they know my position regarding it. I said, look, you can argue
David Chandler from AE 9/11? Is he part of that?
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, but now the thing about them is that now Wayne Cosby himself has now started to delve into the geopolitical atmosphere. But I think that for them it's a little bit too late because they dedicated so much time regarding the physics of the operation itself. But look how long it took them to believe a plane hit the Pentagon. And
I know.
Even though I always say
like,
that
2016 before they admitted a plane hit the Pentagon.
Right. I mean, but listen, I say better late than never.
You know where the disinformation came from? David Ray Griffin. David Ray Griffin is where you can, because these people don't even use their own words. They like quote things like this. They'll say, the soft nose cone of a Boeing 757 could not go through 6 reinforced steel and concrete walls of the rings of... And you look at the blueprints to the Pentagon, the rings are only on the upper floors. Okay. It's not reinforced steel and stuff just because Loose Change said so. They've been renovating it forever. They only had to go through 2 walls, and it's not the nose cone, it's the landing gear. And we know that because there's broken landing gear in front of the hole. There's body parts of all the people who were on the plane. There's pieces of the plane. Loose Change showed the second floor hole only acted like a plane fit through an 18-foot hole. There's a big 90-foot hole on the first floor. Why don't they show you photos of the first floor? Because it debunks their own nonsense. And so for AE 9/11 to be talking about the architecture of a building without even knowing what the architecture even was is very discrediting.
Sure. And you would think that because they're scientists, that they would look at the whole entire blueprint of the building itself. They didn't even do that for years. I don't even know if they did that now because you still have people within, like, Gage's crew aligning with people like Greg McKee and pilots for 9/11 Truth and CIT. And look at those people. They've been disingenuous for years, still to this day.
They finally stopped talking about the hole because I made movies about the hole and showed the giant hole. So then they go, what about the 87 cameras? What about the lawn? What about? Right? And so you got to answer like 100 different things. Like, the 87 number you're getting is from an affidavit about cameras using 9/11 in general, not the Pentagon, most of which were at the second tower in New York City. Oh, yeah, well, what about light poles? What about Rolls-Royce? What about And it's not even their own thoughts. Like, this is stuff that came from the disinformation web from Jonestown and his ilk. And they act like, yeah, I've been doing this research. Like, no, you didn't. You watched a bunch of silly videos on YouTube and went into the site. And, like, you're saying the exact same catchphrase. It's a talking point. You're getting played.
That's right. Piggybacking off the works of others. Now, here's the thing, and I tried to make this quite clear over the last year itself, is that a lot of these people, the no-planers themselves, always say that Israel and the Central Intelligence Agency are behind the attacks on 9/11, but I always tell them that when you dismiss the hijackers and the planes and the phone calls themselves, you automatically dismiss the evidence for Israeli and the CIA to be involved in the attacks themselves. And they always find they're confounded by them. Well, how is that possible?
Yes, that's a good point. That's why the Pentagon is important, because a lot of them will go, well, who cares about the Pentagon? Let's talk about Building 7.
Right.
No, let's talk about the Pentagon, because you know why? This is why it's important to admit there was an airplane and there were hijackers. Because Al-Midhar and Al-Hazmi, who are on that plane, Flight 77, that did hit the Pentagon, you can trace them back to their cell in California, where they did receive money through Moeed Dalket, the wife of Omar Bayoumi, and Osama Basnan, who got money from Bandar Bush and Turk bin Fasil. That means that Saudi royals, through intermediaries, paid 9/11 hijackers. That right there is state involvement in 9/11, which is what you're supposed to be looking for, right? 9/11 truth. Oh, Al-Qaeda didn't do it or what? Yeah, Saudi Arabia gave them financial and logistical support, paid for an apartment, lived with them for a year. But you don't get, and here's the other thing. When they entered the country, they did that after going to an Al-Qaeda summit meeting in Malaysia where they met with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. The CIA knew this, had their phones tapped, had their names, gave that to the State Department, never informed the FBI. So that right there proves collusion with the counterintelligence wing of the CIA, withholding information from the FBI, from known terrorist suspects who have been involved in the USS Cole bombing, etc., who are going to flight schools. And then they want to act like, oh, we didn't anticipate a plane hitting. Unreal. But you can't get to that if you don't admit a plane hit the Pentagon, because that's the paper trail.
Right. And they dismiss all that evidence. And as well as what I was always say, another smoking gun, another anomaly they tend to dismiss is United Airlines Flight 93. Well, the phone calls can't work. Well, there was 6 phone calls that came out of that plane that said there were only 3 hijackers on board. Well, the 9/11 Commission stated there were 4, and Ziad Jarrah was the pilot. But if you take a look, and you've seen it before, you take a look at the flight manuscripts themselves, the person sitting next to the pilot is calling him Saeed. And there was a hijacker on board. His name was Saeed Al-Ghamdi, but according to the 9/11 Commission, he was a muscle hijacker. What is he doing flying the plane? According to the FBI...
Why have the redundancy of everybody going to flight school, right? He was the hijacker according to the other hijackers, but then Al-Jarrah's cousins get busted in Israel as spies. But let's just forget about that. Let's talk about thermite.
Bingo. You just nailed it. I mean, a huge link right to the Israeli Mossad, automatically dismissed because you want to say...
There was another hijacker on Flight 77. There were 6 people. And Nelson Martin knows to work on that. There's a film called 6 on 77, if anybody's interested. But I got a bunch of...
Renee made the...
Well, I'll take
that's right. Renee made
the break here anyway, but then I got to get Doug from Thailand and Tyler and then Mike and then Doug dropped. I'm sorry.
No, I don't want to listen. I want to hold up. I've been on the phone too long, but could you go ahead?
All right. Well, let's get Tyler from Michigan.
Hey Ryan, how you doing?
I'm all right. I was talking about.
I heard all the 9/11 talk, and I just have 2 documentaries that I gotta give a shout out for 9/11 Truth, and that's 1, War by Deception, and 2, Empire Unmasked. If you look those up, you can find out everything you need to know on 9/11.
Well, thanks very much. I made both.
Also, I know this is kind of off subject because you guys are on the 9/11 talk, but I was originally calling to hear a little bit more of your thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard, because I've been doing a little bit more digging on her, and I found out that she's a CFR member. She's had some pretty hawkish quotes towards Iran, and she's also a firm gun control supporter. And she also has a lot of Israeli firsters that have supported her in the past, as well as weapon contractors. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to have to give them after the break. To me, she's the least bad option, but I will talk about it in just a minute. Aloha. Oh, I jumped the gun there a bit. I guess not. Aloha, konnichiwa. This is Ryan Dawson. I have on, we're going to talk about Tulsi Gabbard after, I think that was the last caller.
Yeah, Tulsi, yep.
HB from Tennessee.
Basically,
right?
I was just wondering what your thoughts were on her, knowing that, well, I had done a little digging on her, and I found out that she's a Council of Foreign Relations member. She's had some pretty hawkish quotes towards Iran in the past, especially in the 2013-2014 range. And, obviously her domestic policies on gun control are concerning. And she's also expressed support, or not so much support, but an understanding for the CIA torture program, which I found really disturbing. And also Israeli firsters like the Adelsons have shown support for her in the past. And, it's just all of that's red flags. I'm just kind of wondering what your thoughts are on her.
Yeah, I don't agree with her position on gun control. I mean, she's a Democrat, so that's all of them, really. And so I don't like that. But I'm not really worried about it. They always do that. It's constitutional right, which is up to judges to change, not the president. So I'm not too worried about her position on that. She's not for getting rid of all guns. If you compare her, you have to contrast her with the other clowns on the stage, and she's just better.
That's a good point.
I mean, if you want to compare her, look what some of these other buffoons are saying. So I don't like that about her. Being part of Council of Foreign Relations, I mean, she served in the Armed Service Committee in Congress, and another, what was the other one? Financing? No, and DHS. And she was a soldier, and so you kind of have to, it's realpolitik. Like a lot of these groups, like CFR, for example, is more of where legendary evil people go to retire, right, and do their think tanks and stuff. But I always judge a person by what they do. Like, okay, you're associated with something bad, but vote-wise, I mean, she did oppose war in Syria. She has said bad things about Iran, but as far as what she's actually voted for, it doesn't bother me so much. Like, she did come out against war. Now, her position is a bit nuanced because she did want to change the Iran deal and include some sort of stipulation against their ballistic missile program. I don't agree with that, but it's not going to make me, dismiss. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the government of Iran either. I just don't want to go to war with them. But I don't really see the ballistic missile program being a threat to the United States. It's not really in our interest. But were they to increase that range, they could hit Saudi oil fields, which would be a big disruptor. And there are a lot of things. Like the reason Saudi's at war with Yemen right now, for example, is because they need to circumvent the Strait of Hormuz and get a deep water port that Iran can't shut down so that they can have access to the Maritime Silk Road. And they can't buy it or negotiate because of the religious divide by a Sunni monarchy with Shia neighbors. So that's not going to work. And so they're using the gun. And Iran is resisting that, Saudi supporting it. But Tulsi has said to get rid of this unholy alliance with Saudi Arabia and has voted likewise. And so, I don't like her lip service to some of these Israeli groups and stuff, but I really think that that's almost impossible to not do and still get elected into Congress. So,
I agree. And
compare her to the competition.
She also co-sponsored.
You really want Creepy Joe or Bernie the Nut, So.
No. The lesser of evils, of course, she's the winner.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call her evil.
All right, well, thanks, Ryan, for your I appreciate all the information on that. I mean, that makes me feel a little bit better about her.
Yeah, I mean, she's getting better as we go. We got another break, and then I'll take some more calls. Aloha, this is Ryan Dawson filling in for Mike Rivero. I know I can be hostile to 9/11 Cougars, but, I'm tired of hearing the same thing and seeing our tires spin in circles and going nowhere. I like to get new information out about that. Now, in the beginning of the first hour, we talked about John Bolton, the defective human product, and his botched negotiations in Korea, both from Hanoi and then this latest fiasco. Well, it's not a fiasco. Trump crossed over into the DMZ, and Bolton tried to sabotage it, and is just losing it because he's being left out of the loop this time, which is exactly what we need. And then we got into 9/11 for about an hour. But we've had Mike waiting patiently from Brazil. And I want to take this call. If you are still there, Mike, you are on the air.
Yes, Ryan. Hey.
Thank you for waiting.
Long time no here, huh? Where have you been?
I've been on ANC Report. I keep getting deleted from YouTube, got deleted from Vimeo, got deleted from you name it. So, fighting censorship.
I know that. I've been trying to find you, and I couldn't. You've been taken off YouTube, Vimeo, and whatever platform you used before. And I
got
wondering
taken
what
off of Daily Motion, Gumroad, Live Leak. I'm on BitChute.
But anyway, let me just tell you that I'm very happy to hear you again. You know, I hear your voice and your analysis, and you're one of the better analysts that I've seen in my entire 64 years of life. Okay, well that gave away my age anyway. But listen, I want to take up this issue about you had a fellow. He called like maybe 5 calls ago. He said that the buildings, the World Trade Center buildings, were empty. Well, if those buildings were empty, maybe this guy can tell me where did those guys jumping out of the windows come from? Because
I think he thinks it's all TV, CGI. Yeah, people jumped out the windows.
You think so?
There were people working in the building on September 10th. You know.
Ryan, let me tell you something. I was in New York City at the time, okay, when this happened. I saw the first goddamn plane hitting the building. I didn't have any camera to record it because in those days I didn't have camera. We didn't have smartphones, and I saw the plane hitting the building. I was on 25th and 5th Avenue in downtown Manhattan when this happened. You could clearly see it. I saw the plane and I said, "My God, what an accident! What happened?" You know.
Yeah.
And then I saw those the flames flying out. Anyways, well, if the buildings were empty, then obviously there were no people inside them. Then where did those guys come from jumping out of the buildings? Secondly, talking about the hijacking planes. Okay, now the story goes like there were 4 or 3 hijackers per each plane. Now, I tell you something as a traveler, because I travel a lot. If I would see somebody with a box cutters in his hand, I would take him down in less than a second. And I'm very good at it, what I do. And the fact that the guy, 3 people or 4, whatever, managed to get control of the entire plane sounds so sci-fi. Because I'm sure there were...
The official story changed after 9/12 with the box cutter stuff. They did admit, based on airphone calls, that the hijackers had somehow smuggled in both knives and mace onto the plane. And with Flight 93, we actually find that in the list of debris items that were found were giant Bowie knives. And they actually found where, I believe it was at a Walmart or a Kmart, that there's video footage of 2 of these hijackers purchasing the knives. So it wasn't just box cutters. But the thing is, they don't want you to think on that too long, because then you say, okay, if they had knives and mace, how'd they get it on the plane, right? And it seems the way they did was through bribing the ground crew.
Well, Brian, you have to keep in mind that the security company taking care of the airports, Logan Airport, and the rest of them from where the planes took off, were all handled by an Israeli company.
Mm-hmm. Imagine my lack of shock.
You know that, right?
I know that.
That's right. And the security at the World Trade Center was handled by a cousin of George Bush.
Marvin?
That connects the dots.
Is one of the ones that worked
connects the dots.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
whose babysitter was run over by her own car.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Well, in my humble opinion, I think that 9/11 was a joint U.S.-Israeli operation. I don't think any Arabs were involved in this operation because, first of all, they had nothing to gain. All they gained was bombs. That's all they got. So I'm not sure that the Arabs, any Arab nation, would have been involved in this conspiracy, right? But Israel stood to benefit a lot from this. Remember when they asked Bibi, what do you make of 9/11? And first he said, oh, it's very good. And then he said, it's good because it's going to make the Americans feel what we feel as Israelis living with terrorists all the time.
I thought that was Ariel Sharon that said that. But yeah, maybe it might have been.
Yeah, right. And
well, I've documented the Israeli role in 9/11, but people are like, tell me about thermite. They don't care who did it.
Do you have a website again, or what happened to your website? You used to have a website.
I got Holdeboard, so yeah, there's a website. It's I guess it's okay to plug that on someone else's show. It's called ANC, right? Like anti-neocon, ancreport.com, and you can find the stuff there. ANC Report.
Do me a favor. Can you speak to Mike Rivero putting your website on his page? Because right now I don't have anything to write down with. What you just said,
sure. No
problem. I'm going to forget it.
I'll post a link to an article after I'm done hosting. All right. I got to let you go. We got some more calls. I will. He'll do it, I'm sure. Eric from Tennessee.
Hey, Ryan. Can you hear me okay?
Hello. Yes. How are you?
Hello. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for filling in for Mike because he needs some rest for sure. So
I heard about it about 20 minutes before coming on.
Yeah, okay. Well, I got a quick question for you. I know you're in Japan, and do you see a lot of stores that take Bitcoin or cryptocurrency?
No, not in Japan. I think there are like 8 ATMs, and 7 or 6 of them are in Tokyo, where I don't live, and I think the other ones are out in one in Nagoya and one in Nagasaki. So it's not really a thing here. South Korea has an exchange. That's where the Bitcoin buyers from here, they usually use the South Korean exchange for all the cryptocurrencies. But in Japan, it's very hard to get your money out. So even if you buy at the right time, sell at the right time, you can't fence that back into money that you can actually spend on rent and food and whatnot. Because sometimes it gets
I was thinking more about the retailers, like shopping malls and stuff where you can actually pay.
They don't even take credit cards half the time. Japan's a cash society.
Really?
Yeah, there's not. I don't think there's a single place, maybe in an airport somewhere, but yeah, it's not even. Definitely not. Can't use it.
Well, I appreciate your discussions today. They're very, very good, and I enjoyed listening to you. Thank you for taking over for Mike.
I'm do it anytime I can. I'm doing the best I can.
Okay.
We got Will from North Carolina up next. Another Kakalaki. Will, are you there?
Hello?
Hello.
Hello? Oh, hello. Hi, Ryan.
Hi there.
Since we're on the topic of 9/11, I just want to ask you. So I have a lot of friends who believe that a missile hit the Pentagon. And I've tried to explain to them using your sources that it wasn't, and they still don't believe me after showing them. Any tips? I mean, you could give me
it's
to
a
kind
religion.
of convince them?
I mean, I've got a site called 9/11 Truth for Grown-Ups that walks through all the little talking points about the cameras, the hole, the light poles, every excuse they got from loose change, and that's ridiculous stuff. And it's just, a lot of people are so invested in this because they told everybody and their mother that a missile hit the Pentagon, and so it's hard for them to backtrack in the light of new evidence because then they feel dumb. They feel like they got duped. It doesn't make you stupid because look, it's okay to question 9/11. Our government lies about everything, but some people got out ahead of it and lied to you. And so be mad at them for lying to you. Don't be mad at someone else for giving you new information. It absolutely was the plane. I mean, they found the bodies. It did not evaporate. I've heard all the stuff, But some of these people, you almost got to sit them down one-on-one. And you can't do it through text. If you're going to, text back and forth on Facebook or something like that, forget about it. You got to get them to call you, or even better, meet someone in person and walk them through it and be like, look, here's the big hole on the first floor. Here's a map of all the bodies. Here's the DNA at Walter Reed. Here's an engine. Here's the black box. Here's the tail number. Here's pieces of the plane. And then you got to go over it all, because they have memorized all the nonsense from Loose Change. That's the main one. And they spit out these points, and you're like, oh, look, you can't fit in this hole. I'm like, there's photographic evidence of that whole beat. How do you think Loose Change angled all its shots to only show you the second floor? How does that happen? And who financed that movie? But, some people are a lost cause. I mean, I think about 30% will go, wow, I didn't know that, and change their mind. And the rest are just gonna, hold on to it until they die. It's
I know. I'm sorry.
But I just feel like people that dumb don't count anyway. Like, if someone's got double-digit IQ, they're just going to follow whatever fits their paranoid worldview, and evidence be damned, right? So don't waste your time. Just talk to more intelligent people about what really happened on 9/11, and just don't even waste your day arguing with people talking about missiles and pods and hollow buildings, and it's all television and space rays and whatever. I mean, they're kooks. And they just want to put you in the defense. They want you to argue about physics and stuff and not talk about who did it. That's their job. They're useful idiots run by Mockingbird program of the CIA, the one that gives you the catchphrases. Like, they did the same thing for Kennedy, like grassy knoll, right? Who says knoll, right? Who uses that kind of vocabulary, right? They use weird words, and everyone's, ooh, who's on the grassy knoll? I'm like, oh, yeah. You're not thinking for yourself. You're being played. And you say, as an event as huge as 9/11, especially if our government has involvement in it, you better believe they had a disinformation campaign sitting ready for after the event. And that's what got piped to people, knowing reliable blowhards like Alex Jones, who's just like a paranoid freakazoid that would definitely gobble up every bit of goofy disinfo possible and say it to the masses. And he has done irreversible damage to 9/11. Because you just, like, it's every other person that talks about it thinks, one of these nonsense stories are sacrosanct. And it just, all I can say is you can try your best, but at a certain point, don't waste your time. You can lead a horse to water, that's all you can do,
Yeah, I gave up with them because I even brought someone I knew into the conversation because his mother worked in D.C. at the time of the attack, and she saw the plane, fly over the highway, and they're like, they're just dismissing them, and like, no, you're not, you're lying, you're just trying to prove my point. So I kind of just gave up after that.
495, 395 is very, very busy section of Virginia/D.C. All those people are not lying. All those family members are not just pretending everyone saw it go to the Pentagon. No one saw it fly away from the Pentagon. But you know what? It doesn't matter how many points you make or how much evidence you have. They're just sitting there. They're not even listening. They're just waiting for their turn to talk so they can say the talking point that they didn't even think of themselves, that they saw from some stupid movie on YouTube. They're just sitting there going, what about this? And it's like, I already addressed that. You didn't hear what I said. They don't care.
No, they don't. One final thing. So did you see that that Pence got called back from his trip? Did that have anything do you think that has anything to do with that Russian submarine?
The one in the Arctic?
Yeah.
It was like 2 a.m. when that happened, so over here. So I have not had time to really to verify that or not. It could, but I don't have anything solid, so I don't want to. If I say something to an audience this big, it would be irresponsible. So I'm going to have to withhold judgment until I have more information. But if you know anything, you're free to say. I mean, he was pulled back, but kind of the Russian Navy's a little bit. That's their weak underbelly. Russia's advantage is in their artillery and their air defense. So. Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading a Sputnik article because Putin had an emergency meeting where he got called back for, and that it ended about a little over an hour and a half ago, and it basically, just said like it was an accident, I think it was 14 dead Russians because of smoke inhalation, and that's about it. And they're going to look into it.
Well, we'll see what they come up with. It's too soon to make any rash judgments. I'm sure Bolton will blame everything on Iran, though. No.
Right? He'll find a way.
My old joke is, if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, no one sees it, can we still blame Iran? That's the Israeli line. They are on it. I think Trump might fire him. I really do.
I hope. I hope. I hope he gets fired.
After watching the Democratic debates, that was like a big commercial for Donald Trump, watching that fest happen in front of us.
Oh, yeah. Bunch of open border talk, gun grabbing. That's going to make people vote for Trump instantly.
Plus health care. Not just open borders. Open border and free health care.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. They wanted to give, health care to, non-criminal offenders or something like that?
Oh, my favorite is free abortions for male transgender QRS whatevers. Like men
I watched
pretending
that
to
live
be girls.
Couldn't believe
Wow.
it. I saw that live and could not believe that. I thought I misheard, but apparently I didn't.
But these people don't live in the real world. They are so insulated from working class people. And there was what's the ginger's name? One of them did bring this up, because we need to focus on what works or something like that, and stop being so elitist or whatever. And they got very modest applause. All of them like, oh, whatever, and rolled their eyes. But he's the one bit of sense that was actually said, because they're completely divorced from reality, saying, oh yeah, let's have a 70% tax rate. I think Beto said that. I mean, what? 70% in taxes? And you want to pay for illegals' health care? I mean, these are the kind of people that would tell coal miners in West Virginia to learn to code, right? I mean, that's what's wrong with the Democratic Party. Like, when they say stuff so aloof, it's like they all live in their little bubbles in L.A. or whatever. The real world, with real working people who live check to check, cannot afford to pay for someone else's health care. Nor do they want taxes going up to 70%, or in Bernie's case, 90%. Nor can they pay for all of these wars. The only ones that had any sort of economic plan to pay for all the social programs they promised were Tulsi and Andrew Yang. And I believe they cut Yang's mic off. And they put a fake pimple on Tulsi Gabbard. Did you hear about Pimplegate?
No, I didn't. This is interesting.
So, okay, MSNPC is what I call it, but the non-playable character. MSNBC, somebody, a staffer or whatever, they superimposed a pimple on her chin. You can check this out after the broadcast. It's on YouTube for now. It'll be on BitChute too. And it's when they asked her the Iran question. She had this big red dot on her chin, and then it disappears right in front of you. And it wasn't there earlier, and it's not there the rest of the night. And Tulsi was asked about it. She's like, no, I mean, that wasn't there. This needs to be investigated. Somebody just decided to stick a zit on her face. I mean, that's how immature the people are at MSNBC. But, of course, they're the same. They're like, we got to speak out against conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, Russia hacked our election. Anyway, thanks for your call. I got to go through the break, and I'll be back on the other side for this. I got to say, Mike Rivero has the best intro songs. I miss this. This is Ryan Dawson filling in for Mike Rivero. He's a little under the weather and going to take a couple days off out there. So aloha, konnichiwa from Japan, aloha from Hawaii. I appreciate all the calls. The number to call in, you don't have to talk about 9/11 either, is 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. And you can also Skype through to RBN2. And they will patch you through to talk if you are overseas and you don't want to hold on the phone for so long. You can use Skype. So we have been talking we got, I wouldn't say sidetracked into 9/11. 9/11 is a very important event, and it does prelude into the Iraq War and the propaganda on Iran. But we were talking before about Korea. We talked about John Bolton, the passing of the excellent writer Justin Raimondo. I will miss him forever. And we got into the war propaganda about Iran, and I was linking the defective human products, Israeli ties to the lies about Iran, and comparing that to Iraq and the propaganda that led to a war in Iraq, where over 1 million people were murdered, a country was flipped upside down, Fallujah was bombed back in the Stone Age, and we were given things like Abu Ghraib. And it reminded me of a story that I recently did on my own show that a lot of millennials were unaware of. We got to realize that back in 2003, 2004, some people were coming to fruition today were junior high school or younger. And they did not hear all the stories about Abu Ghraib prison and how even in the U.S. Congress, we're allowed to listen to a tape where Iraqi mothers were forced to listen to the screams and cries of their own children who were being raped and sodomized. And they played this as a means of sleep deprivation. And some of these women killed themselves. The U.S. raped children, recorded it, and played it for their mothers. Our Congress heard these torture screams, only selective group of them, the McCains and company, and still did nothing. Let that sink in. Mark from New York, how are you?
Hey.
Hello
in
there.
Japan, huh?
Yes,
Hello.
in Osaka. G20 was
Where?
just here. Osaka, near Kyoto. In the
Can
west.
you tell us about Fukushima?
What would you like to know? Fukushima was horrible.
Is it still on? Is it
Oh,
still
no,
ongoing?
No, so the worst part, in my opinion, about Fukushima was the tidal wave itself. That wiped out 20,000 people, died, mostly elderly. And I might get choked up because when we went to Fukushima, well, not in Fukushima, but near Ibaraki and adjacent places, Miyagi, places that where a lot of people drowned. And saw the saddest thing. It was a school bus turned sideways, an elementary school bus. And you know all those kids are just gone. And that's what's so heartbreaking. Now, I know what internationally what people were worried about is, of course, the radiation and the nuclear. But I just feel like I can't not say something about the tidal wave itself and all the people who perished in that. Because I feel like they just get brushed over. Like, oh, yeah, they died now. You know, I feel like let's think about this. How horrible that was. They had no means of escaping. And so when they show video of it, they show the cars and stuff being washed away, but you got to realize how many people just instantly died from that. And then we had TEPCO and KEPCO. TEPCO was the T is for Tokyo. KEPCO is K for Kansai. Kansai is a region with Kyoto, Nara, Osaka, that were supposed to be regulating the nuclear facilities, and did they did a piss poor job in both areas. Now, KEPCO's been cleaned up. They weren't hit by the tsunami, but the reaction to it did put a lot of pressure on the nuclear regulatory organizations and safety procedures and regulations. You got to blame the government for a lot of this too. What happened at Fukushima itself is the spent fuel rods first. The heat was so high that the hydrogen from the water, it actually split it up and burst into flames. There wasn't a fission reaction like Chernobyl or anything like that, so it wasn't like a nuclear bomb went off. But it's still a very serious situation when you've got nuclear waste leaking into water, making radioactive water, and the top being blown off of the facility at Daiichi. But horrible as that is, a lot of what the internet did was make it 1,000 times worse. And so a couple things happened. Really, it's a very important question. Appreciate your call. Talk about it a little bit more after. Aloha. This is Ryan Dawson trying to fill in for Mike Rivero last minute. I'll promise to prep more for the the next shows is should he still be out. He's dealing with a little bit of illness. He'll be back, though, stronger than ever. We've been covering many issues, everything from Korea to 9/11, and now I had a question from Mark in New York about Fukushima. I live in Japan. I was here also on March 11th of 2011 when the tsunami hit and caused the whole thing to go down. And I think there's a little bit over focus on radiation scares and not so much on the political corruption that happened afterward with an outpour of charities whose money was mismanaged and thrown into ridiculous things. I tried to cover that best I can. And there was a lot of fear-mongering, too. And, some things were not true and some are. And I actually did a long video with James Corbett, if you know him. He's a journalist that also lives out here in Japan, where we walk through, what was real and what wasn't with Fukushima. And I put my money where my mouth is. I live here. I have children here. I'm not worried about radioactive fallout or anything like that because there isn't any. And you can say, oh, my gosh, well, that's just because the government's covering up. Not really. It's not possible. You physically can't cover up radiation. If it's there, it's there. And it permeates everything. And I have done the $1,000 challenge for people to come over. So that would basically give you a free trip to get your own Geiger counter, whatever it is up to your standard, and measure wherever you want. You're not going to find any readings any different than the United States or Europe because radiation is not leaking out everywhere, as people assume. Somebody took a wave map of the tsunami and then changed from Australia or something, and they changed the heading on it and called it a radiation map. And this meme went everywhere. I was like, don't you think it's weird that radiation just stops wherever there's land and it's only in the water, just like it's about to come to California, as Alex Jones said over and over again. And, there were YouTubers out there being like, look, I have readings on this beach, and they're standing on top of thorium, which is radioactive. Radiation from Fukushima is not going across the Pacific Ocean into California. It's not even reaching adjacent areas of Japan. That doesn't mean there's not a problem. There's a huge problem. But when you over-exaggerate a situation, you're going to cause some people to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so, yeah, people lied about the wave map. There was even a story saying the starfish are dying. No one bothered to look and see that it's from 2008, so I really doubt radiation went back in time and killed the starfish. It was just a pylon, and that's the unfortunate kind of nature of the internet. There are people that know spookadoo fear-mongering is clickbait, and Fukushima was the huge cash cow, and everybody was lying about it. And some people weren't lying, they were just being fooled. And it was hard to tell, what's right, what isn't, because you can't trust the Japanese government, you can't trust any government. But then you also don't want to, follow the Pied Piper of fear, like Alex Jones and that kind of ilk, the kind of online, I call it fear porn, that just want to act like it's doomsday every day and the dollar's about to collapse and just any kind of catastrophe they can think of. They keep you on edge so they can sell you stuff. But I live in Japan. The Olympics are coming to Japan. So is the World Cup rugby tournament. It's going to be here this year. It's perfectly safe to visit. There isn't radiation leaking out of Fukushima. But what they do have is a problem around the area of about a 30-mile radius, to be safe, at the plant, where they cannot contain some of this radioactive water, which is used already as part of the coolant, that is unfixable. And so what they're doing is they're dumping it very slowly, I don't forget how many parts per million, whatever, into the ocean, which sounds horrible. But the rate that it's happening is I think Forbes did a report, it'd be like 73 million bananas or something. That is radioactive. I mean, even bananas, all of them are, but nothing to cause three-eyed fish or anything like that. Nothing like what happened in Nagasaki and Hiroshima even. And there are thriving cities in both those locations right now. And it certainly had problems. But it is not the end of the world, and if you live in California or Hawaii or whatever, you're perfectly safe. Nothing from Fukushima is going to come get you. What we do need to do, though, is move to thorium. because we wouldn't be in this mess if you had an option to move power plants inland where they don't even have to be near large bodies of water, because thorium, not only is it more abundant, cheaper, more efficient, it's so much safer. The molten salt reactors of thorium, and there's talks about it by Kurt Sorensen. There's a talk I did with Carl Denninger on ANC Report explaining what thorium is. Mike Rivero has gone over it before. I think Mike and I have talked about it before. Thorium ought to be the future. It's not, and it has nothing to do with science. It's all politics. It's a political resistance against thorium, and the doomsday climate changers and stuff are out there. It's just a mess, and it's not opposed because of the science. Let me make that clear. This is a political problem. Josh, if you're there from Oklahoma, I'm sorry, I didn't see your call there, bud. Are you there still?
Hey, yeah, what's up, buddy?
You're being patient.
How you doing?
I'm all right.
Hey, no problem, man. I wanted to get one Bolton comment out of the way. Do you think he might forget what country he's supposed to be calling for war against if he eats a big bowl of Gappy chili?
Well, I mean,
I think he might.
Apparently, you forget the names of your children's teachers.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I'm going to drop that one in.
Nice.
I did actually have a couple of questions. One of them, first one was, you heard about I don't know if you covered it or not, about the I believe it was something in Russia got bombed.
They had a submarine accident. Yeah.
They had a sub bomb, okay, or an accident about it. I didn't know if it was like an attack or the other.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's an accident, and I'm not going to say it is or isn't because I haven't had time to vet the information. This sort of happened as I started the show. So it was like, according to the Russians so far, it was not in the Arab Sea, it was in the Arctic, and there was a fire, and I think 14 Russians died of smoke inhalation. So far, no foul play. We'll see what.
Well, you know how that goes. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't jump the gun. A lot of people are just so anxious to be first or whatever. I'd rather be correct. So let's see what info we can get. Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to comment on too, it made me kind of think about, was when you were talking about how they did with the in Abu Ghraib about the sound. That's the same thing they did years before. Yeah, they've been doing that psycho war type stuff, like the audio type things like that. I mean, they were doing that in Waco. They did that with the bunnies, and they did similar stuff before. I think that was all ex-paperclip stuff that they picked up. It's like, that's like warfare stuff works really good. We're going to start using that. And that's been part
programmed of the civil infrastructure in Vietnam too, torturing people like that.
Yeah.
And they experimented with that, expounding upon methods with MK Ultra, with George White and the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. But that wing got overtaken by the CIA.
Right. Well, you know who came out of that program that a lot of people have an issue either for or against? Uncle Ted.
Yeah, well, Uncle Ted's writings are still prolific in my eyes, but you know who else was involved with MK Ultra that a lot of people don't know about? Jack Ruby.
Rubenstein?
Also known as Jacob Rubenstein, yes. Used to go to the airport with George White and pick up Traficante on their cocaine smuggling from Cuba to Tampa.
There was a famous doctor who was one of like you and Cameron's guys, like his under guys. He killed a elephant in the Oklahoma City Zoo in Oklahoma here with a bunch of LSD and I think like 2 car batteries to try to like charge it hard to pump it back up, and like cooked it in front of a bunch of people back in the 60s, I believe.
Wild.
Yep. Yeah.
Interesting statistic.
Yeah, I didn't believe it either.
More people, check this out. More people were killed by elephants last year than Japanese. I mean, Japan's murder rate was so low that more people died from elephants.
Like just on that part of the world, or just in Japan in general, or?
I mean, if you add up all the murders in all the cities in Japan, because they haven't killed anyone else, I mean, it's less than how many died from elephants in India.
Elephants and elephants. Yeah, they're kind of rampant out in India.
A year, I mean. I don't know if it's
That's a
because
great
people are riding
statistic.
them or if these are wild elephants that just stomp people, but I saw a really Chad story, because I have no sympathy for people who poultry rhinoceros, right? And the title was, and
Yeah.
I'm not making this up, maybe you saw this already, but it says, Rhino Poulture stamped to death by elephant and eaten by lions. There's your karma.
That's great. That's so good, man. That's so good. I'm writing that one down for later.
Yeah, check that story out. He went after a rhino, totally illegal, endangered species,
Yeah.
by the way. An elephant,
Yep.
there were 3 of them, and an elephant stomped one of them down, and then chased the other ones off, and the 2 that survived went to get the body of the 3rd one, and lions grabbed him, and so he was eaten by lions after being stomped by an elephant because he was trying to poultry a rhino. And I just was like, I'll have a Coke, please.
Yeah, just shows you don't mess with Disney, they get you back.
Yeah, don't mess with nature. Why would you poultry a rhino?
Yep, absolutely.
Like, why?
Why? Doesn't make sense. They're not a nuisance. They're not one of those type of animals.
I mean, you have to go out where they live and mess with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you got to go on their turf.
People think rhino horn is involved as an aphrodisiac or one of those what's the
tiger
drug?
penis suit things.
Yeah, I forget what's the famous drug? Viagra type things. Yeah, it isn't.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's just keratin, like your fingernails. That's all horn is made of. It's just a protein.
So
but
people are sitting around snorting. People are snorting keratin trying to get boners.
Yeah, I mean, getting in
that's
shape.
Hilarious. Yeah, that would be the first thing. That would be the first one. Well, hey, anyways, man, I gotta hop off here, man. But I just wanted to call in and give you all some support and ask you a couple. So I gotta get out of here.
Thank you very much. I did not know that about the elephant in Oklahoma. That's a localized story. Really wild. Thanks for sharing.
I will tell you. I'll tell you more about that one later.
Okay, no problem. Post it on WH.
Right.
Thank you very much. We got about 15 minutes left. Not really quite enough time to go into anything in detail, but we'll touch some stuff. I will look into what happened with the Russian sub as soon as I get off here and get some time. The number to call in, by the way, we can probably get 1 or 2 more in, is 800-313-9443. And write that down because it'll be the same for every show. And I may or may not be here tomorrow as well. John Bolton's got to go. And if you are a Trump supporter, you should be telling him he's got to fire Bolton. That man has sabotaged peace with North Korea. He nearly brought us to the brink of war with Iran. It's not even nearly. The planes were in the air. And apparently Trump was watching Tucker Carlson. And that's what changed his mind. He called off the attack. They think they could just go bomb some radar like they used to do with Iraq, what Clinton used to do. That is not going to happen with Iran. Iran has leverage. And the U.S. is sitting ducks with their fleet in Bahrain, their Air Force in Qatar, and the weakest target, Saudi oil fields. And Iran could pummel those. And trust me, the Iron Dome Patriot system, that's not going to do squat. These aren't scuds. Okay. And if Iran is threatened enough, yeah, the United States could defeat Iran if we want to lose about 10,000 soldiers and God knows how many trillions of dollars and create, if you think the refugee crisis is bad in Europe now, wait and see what would happen if you went to war with Iran. I mean, it would just, you wouldn't be able to recognize places like Sweden or London, if not already. There is no military solution for Iran. They are not building a bomb. I agree with Ron Paul. We should have peace and trade and, get along with our neighbors. Iran's not a threat to the United States. Israel's the one that has a problem with Iran. The U.S. needs to get back on the deal and scrap this nonsense about uranium enrichment, which isn't happening. Unfreeze assets and allow free trade. If not, you're pushing China into the arms of Russia. You're alienating your allies. Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, they need oil and gas. Oh, Doug is back. Doug from Thailand. Sorry I missed you the first time. You got a little bit of time to get it in right now if you're still there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Thanks
Yes,
for taking
sir.
the call. Yeah, let's start it. Hear that little dispute between you and the other guy from North Carolina.
Don't remember.
It's so important to have some kind of unified, I don't know if there's a consensus about who's responsible for 9/11, but I just had a couple ideas, and it was related to thermite. I didn't want to get you too upset with this, but how about them shipping got to get their everything out of their offices some 6 weeks before?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have the empties come to get the. You're going to come to empty containers to get all their furniture, right? And they got the thermite in there, not empty, and they put it in the elevators, and they just run them up and down and just spray it up on the ships in a few hours. These little vans are just logistics. Sure, thank you.
Well, they found explosive devices in vans parked in the parking garage of the World Trade Centers on 9/11, and it was RDX. But to me, it's splitting hairs whether it's RDX or TNT or thermite or shape chargers, whatever, or C4. It doesn't matter. I'm most interested in who did it. And who did it links back to the furniture moving companies like Urban Moving Systems, which helped move them out of the building. So that's where we go with that. And people seem uninterested in the rest of the story and say, oh, no, it's nanothermite, and it can only be made in this one place. And it's from this naval yard, and yet it's not only made in one place. And it's not built from the atom up. None of that is true. And we had cars packed with RDX that were found. There was another one in Liberty State Park. There was one in the Meadowlands. There was one on the George Washington Bridge. There was one in Pennsylvania. There was one coming back from Chicago. It led to 6 other companies, one of which moved a 9/11 hijacker and gave him logistical support. I don't have time to explain the whole story. It's in a film called The Empire Unmasked, which is purchasable. I appreciate the time, everybody. I'm privileged to fill in for Mike Rivero. I'm glad he trusts me with this. Aloha, konnichiwa. Well, this is the final segment for today's What Really Happened radio show, podcast show on RBN. This is Ryan Dawson filling in from Japan, Osaka. The number to call in, if you want to squeeze in one more call or two before we get off the air here, is 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. I did want to talk a bit more about the debates. I guess in 5 minutes, maybe that's not the best topic. I also want to mention that God's chosen lunatics, also known as the Israelis, they fired over 100 missiles into Syria yesterday, murdered 2 babies, a family of 4, killed a 3-month-old and a 7-month-old. And isn't it interesting that Israel acts as Al-Qaeda's air force? They have not once attacked ISIS. They have not once attacked Aral al-Sham. They have not once attacked al-Nusra Front. In fact, they gave them hospital aid. And, Syria is not an organic war. Syria is where the CIA and other foreign intelligence agencies are working hand in hand, just like they did in Iran-Contra, to work with a bunch of mercenary proxy armies of terrorists to overthrow Bashar al-Assad and have regime change. Shouldn't even use their language. Change of government. It's not a regime. That's what all the boogeymen are regimes. I don't say administration for the U.S. I say the Obama regime, the Clinton regime, the Bush regime. We have the regime. We're the one murdering millions of people. Shouldn't even say we, they, because it's not us. It's anarcho-tyranny. They don't represent us. As Tulsi Gabbard said, they're representing, it's a plutocracy. They're representing wealth. It's the Soroses, the Kochs that, if you got a lot of money, you have a voice. If not, you're just sort of there. We don't matter. As George Carlin put it best, they don't care about you at all. At all. And add a few F-bombs. But Carlin was the man. He was prophetic. Probably my favorite comedian as well. But Tulsi's on the money on that point, and she has her flaws. But look at the rest of them. It's the clown car is broken. It only turns left. And they are just getting goofier and goofier. And that will just lead to another Trump victory. Now, Trump's had his high points. But one of his lowest low points has been with Israel. And this is all of them. And Hillary would have been worse. Fine. But he moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He labels Iran's Revolutionary Guard as terrorists, which they in turn then labeled U.S. Central Command as terrorists, which is hilarious because they are. Then he gave the Golan Heights to Israel verbally. It's not his to give, but that's what the side he came down on. And you got to hold his feet to the fire. Fire John Bolton. Everybody on Twitter, wherever, Facebook, etc., I want you to write, fire John Bolton. I want everyone doing that. See you tomorrow. An American holiday coming up. Peace. Fire John Bolton. Let's make this happen. I'm Ryan Dawson signing off.